Super Necromancer System Chapter 41, Figan the Zealot. Aldrich could not hear or see until his eardrums healed and his eyes adjusted from the intense blinding light, like a flashbang had been set off right in front of him. Seemed like, though undead had night vision, blinding effects still worked on them provided they still had eyes. Nothing could tell him how the battle ended except a message from his status screen. Boss, Figan the Zealot defeated. Plus 800 XP. Express bar, 771,200 greater than 1570-1200. Level up. Level 10 greater than 11. Express bar, 371,400. 5 stat points available to distribute. Aldrich breathed a sigh of relief. He was 99% sure Figan was dead, but when he saw those messages, he felt absolutely confident. He waited a good 20 or so seconds until his blinding faded and his ears healed up with his anti-life shell. He saw Valera and Dynamite Girl standing in front of him, squabbling while the Geist looked awkwardly between them, trying to resolve the conflict but not knowing how. "You blinded and hurt him," said Valera as she pointed an accusing finger at Dynamite Girl. "What? You wanted me to hold back on blasting that squid-faced freak? You think that's what the captain would have wanted, said Dynamite Girl. "Enough," said Aldrich. "Both of you did well. All of you, in fact." Aldrich looked around with appreciation at his undead. Valera was still shaky on her feet, weak from taking so much damage. Dynamite Girl's arms were both mangled with cracked bone jutting out through the skin of her arm while she bled from the mouth, her heart ruptured from exerting herself. Most of his undead suffered significant burns that they now slowly healed on Aldrich's anti-life shell. Really only the 2 crabs got out of this fight untouched, and that was because they had been protected. All in all, though, Aldrich felt that he had cleared Figan with moderate difficulty. He initially thought the fight was going to be an easy cakewalk by abusing the boss's game AI, but he was sentient, or at the very least somewhat sentient, letting him make decisions outside of Aldrich's awareness. "Where is he?" "The boss," said Aldrich. "Nothing left of that freak," said Dynamite Girl proudly as she pointed over to a massive blackened crater. It looked like a high ordnance missile had bored into the ground and exploded, gouting out a blackened crater the size of a small house at the end of the arena. Aldrich sighed. "I wanted some part of him left to see if I could resurrect him." Normally in Elden World, it was not possible to reanimate boss-type monsters or beings. But maybe now it was different. Aldrich had wanted to find out. "Sorry, Captain," said Dynamite Girl. "No, it's fine. You couldn't have held back anyway. We either finished him in one hit or we didn't." "Good job." Aldrich walked over to the crater and spied the rewards from this boss fight. Flogan's lantern floated in the air in the deepest center of the crater. Aldrich picked it up by tapping it with his staff. 1x Fokeeper's lantern obtained. There was also an item orb containing a silver ring designed in the shape of 2 coiling serpents. The Ring of Avarice. Aldrich absorbed this too. 1x Ring of Avarice obtained. With Ring of Avarice, Aldrich would receive a set amount of coins every 3 days. The amount of coins he received for this changed depending on what level he was. From levels 1 to 10, he received 100 coins. In increments of 10 levels, this coin reward increased according to these values: 150 at level 20, 225, LVL 30, 300, LVL 40, 500, LVL 50, 700, LVL 60, 1000, LVL 70, 2000, LVL 80, 2500, LVL 90, 4000, LVL 100. Hopefully, this would give Aldrich enough coins to last as he did not start receiving coin drops from monsters in trial quests until the second one onwards. But beyond this, Aldrich noticed something that Figan did not drop his soul. Ordinarily, bosses always drop their soul. What changed now? What Figan did drop was something he never dropped in the game. The crimson-red orb he held in his hand that was part of his visual design, but nothing more than that. Aldrich knelt down and picked the orb up. It was the size of a baseball, not particularly large, but it was surprisingly heavy. On it were inscribed several lines of sigils glowing an eerie green. Within, he saw the faint flicker of a familiar white, the flicker of a soul. Flogan's soul. That was when Aldrich noticed that he could see the bright green of a grave marker inside the orb as well. Figan could be resurrected using this orb. Aldrich started to recall game lore. Mind-eaters like Figan were obsessed with knowledge, and because the pursuit of knowledge was never-ending by its nature, they required immortality to continue amassing knowledge throughout Elden World and its realms. Mind-eater immortality was thus quite simple. A large brain-shaped, tendril-covered supermass known as Elder Mind spawned mind-eaters to roam and absorb knowledge, and then mind-eaters grew too weak or old, they returned to the Elder Mind whereupon they would get absorbed. The mind-eater's knowledge would transfer to the Elder Mind, and then their biomass would get reused to birth another mind-eater. Mind-eaters ordinarily had undying loyalty to their Elder Minds via mental control, but some broke from this control. Those that broke free still hungered for knowledge and thus still needed long lifespans for this pursuit, and so they sought other means of immortality that did not involve sacrificing themselves. The path to becoming a lich was one of the more common ones among these mind-eaters. Figan was one such mind-eater that sought to become a lich. Hence, his backstory was that he had locked himself in this underground study for decades, growing mad trying to become not only a lich, but one also utterly immune to fire to become an invincible undead. Then, Aldrich thought as he stared at the orb in his hand, this was a phylactery. An object, often an orb, that a mortal being imbued their souls in to take the first steps to turning into a lich. Their flesh bodies rotted away to skeletal forms upon casting their souls away, but in exchange, these skeletal bodies became highly attuned to magic, death, curses, and, most importantly, were disposable, capable of reforming so long as the phylactery holding the main soul remained intact. In Elven World, the player character Necromancer came from a line of mortal necromancers that reviled becoming a lich and actively hunted them. Becoming a lich meant abandoning one's humanity and binding themselves to the original lich known as the Deathlord, one of the evil gods of Elven World that allied with the Howling Dark to destroy all life. The Deathlord's end goal was to destroy life so that all souls entered into his own realm of death where he would rule over all creation infinitely. Typical big bad evil god stuff. As a result, the player characters Necromancer and other mortal necromancers fought against the Deathlord as where the Deathlord believed all creation should die and serve him. Mortal necromancers believed the boundary between life and death should be respected and maintained. It was said that part of the ritual to become a lich involved not only forging a phylactery, but also communing with the Deathlord to take a shard of his power. This shard would then fuel the ritual and make the phylactery complete, finalizing the steps to become a lich. Those that were too weak-willed who faced the Deathlord lost their minds to him and became his lich slaves. Those that were strong enough, however, took the Deathlord's shard of power for themselves and became independent and mighty liches. This was all Aldrich knew of the process to become a lich. How to craft a phylactery and all the steps in between making one and communing with the Deathlord were not explained in the game as player characters cannot become undead. But, what if Aldrich could find someone that knew all of this? Someone that would serve him and guide him through the process. And the someone was right here in the palm of Aldrich's hand. Aldrich put down the orb and chanted, "Serve." He felt an immense strain on his body as his magical energy roared around him in a raging green aura. He felt life and magic leave him, draining him rapidly. All of this sacrificed life and mana flowed into the phylactery in twin strands of green and crimson. "Master, you are taking too much damage," said Valera. "I'm fine," said Aldrich as mana and life continued to drain from him. This was far more than the 10% maximum health cost he sacrificed for raising monsters that were much higher level than him. This was the cost of raising a boss-type monster, it seemed. A continuous mana and health sacrifice. A type of being that Aldrich had never been able to raise in the game. He was thankful he had saved his mana and health so conservatively throughout the fight, but as he felt himself getting drained second by second, he wondered if he had enough. Eventually, Aldrich reached 10% of his maximum health and mana, and at that point, his spells stopped draining his health and mana. He breathed heavily as sweat trickled from his forehead. He looked down at the phylactery. A green aura enveloped the crimson orb before it rapidly shook and oscillated. All of a sudden, a burst of energy blasted outwards in a shockwave, knocking Aldrich back. Valera caught him and kept him on his feet. Green and red particles swirled in front of the phylactery, forming into Flogan's form. Aldrich waited tensely, wondering if Fligan was hostile, especially with his mental insanity, and was ready to take away his individuality or, if needed, dispel him at a moment's notice. But Fligan did not fight. Instead, he knelt down and closed his 3 red eyes in reverence. "Your wish is my command, O Elder. I thank you for granting me the eternity I have always searched for." Author, note. I received a web novel contract. As a result, I think I'll be going premium very, very soon. Thank you. Super Necromancer System Chapter 42, Bonus, Becoming a Lich. Bonus chapter for getting me to 800 Power Stones. Aldrich did not respond immediately to Fligan, still wary about whether he had the potential to be aggressive. He felt out the mental connection he had between Master and Undead Familiar, and as he did so, he saw status messages appear in his vision. Trial Quest, the search completed. Plus 500 XP. Plus 500 coins. Learn Passive, Corpse Barrier. Learn Passive, Death Sense. Learn Class Spell, Grave Consumption. Obtained, Tome of Enhancement. Obtained 1x Sign Stone. Obtained 3x Restorative Flask Charges. Express Bar, 371,400ths greater than 871,400ths. Aldrich breathed in deeply, feeling power flow into him. Bit by bit, he was getting back to the power of his original player character. Death Sense allowed Aldrich to sense the presences of any units under 10% of their maximum health, which was particularly useful considering that this was generally the max health range for most instant death-type spells to work as executes. Grave Consumption allowed Aldrich to take a grave marker and consume it, healing 5% of his maximum health. It could also be used on resurrected undead, destroying the undead and absorbing its negative energy to restore 10% of maximum health. Corpse Barrier was particularly useful. It gave Aldrich a bonus shield that consisted of 30% of his maximum health, and the neat thing was that this barrier could regenerate very quickly by adding corpses into it. Of course, if Aldrich used a corpse to pad his barrier, he could not raise it to become an undead. The Tome of Enhancement would also grant Aldrich access to upgraded versions of his current spells. Overall, this was a massive boost in power. "Is something amiss, O Elder?" said Fligan. Aldrich looked at Fligan and the thought immediately struck him, he could get even stronger. "Nothing," said Aldrich as he made sure he felt no hostility from Fligan. "Tell me, you seem to have been sentient. What do you remember about this place? About what happened to you in the past few decades?" Valera perked up, highly curious for the same reason that Aldrich was. They wanted to know what exactly happened to the game universe of Elden World. "Everything ended for me," said Fligan. "I had holed myself in my study for my pursuit to achieve eternal life. It was many years I threw myself into this search, but at one point, I do not know when, I felt as if I was in a haze. Walking in a dream from which there was no waking. During that time, I was conscious and not conscious. I acted only in my search for immortality. But I did not feel as if I was in my own body. I simply was. Like you were sleepwalking," said Aldrich. He turned to Valera. This sounds exactly like what you went through. He also went into a sort of eternal sleep. Indeed, my master, said Valera. And you remember nothing else? Aldrich turned back to Fligan. Fligan shook his mouth tendrils. No. I see, said Aldrich. I notice you do not seem nearly as, well, committed to your search for immortality. You mean he's not fucking batshit insane anymore, said Dynamite Girl bluntly. Yes, I was trying to be polite here, said Aldrich. I tell you, master, whelps these days have no sense of decorum or manners, said Valera as she shook her head. Ha! I'm young, is that it? Doesn't that mean you're some sort of old hag, said Dynamite Girl. Valera immediately stood up, her armor clanking, and she strode up to Dynamite Girl and stared her down, towering over the hero. What was that? Said Valera. Just saying what you admitted, said Dynamite Girl. GHGH, what a pointless argument, said the Geist. What did you say? Valera and Dynamite Girl shouted in complete union, synchronizing angry head turns to the Geist. Gay. Nothing, the Geist raised its muscular arms in the air in surrender. Calm down, all of you. No point in arguing among ourselves. And you, Valera, you should be thankful for the Geist. It saved you, said Aldrich. I suppose, grumbled Valera. She bowed her head slightly to the Geist. I thank you for your service, good creature. She paused awkwardly. And I apologize for thinking of you as a foul abomination of nature. G'hay, the Geist rubbed its head and nodded, taking the apology gratefully. Hey now, ain't we all just freaks of nature at this point, said Dynamite Girl. No, we are perfect beings now, said Valera. We may not fit into the normal cycle of life and death anymore, but that is precisely why we are ascendant. Guess that's a good way of looking at this whole undead thing, said Dynamite Girl. She speaks truly, said Fligan. For decades, I sought Undeath for it was the purest form of transcending the limits of the body. Mindless undead are little more than aberrations, but higher undead such as ourselves with our minds still intact are truly transcendent. Fligan nodded to Valera. And as for your question, O Elder. My madness was cast upon me not only from my quest for immortality, but also from the sleep from which I fell into. That sleep kept my drive, my madness, strong. But now that I have been freed from that sleep and also granted immortal Undeath, there's nothing that clouds my judgment any longer. Good, said Aldrich. If you were even just a little bit unstable, I would have kept you a mindless slave. To you who has granted me the gift of Undeath, I serve gratefully, said Fligan. Let's keep it that way. Now then, this, Aldrich picked up Flagon's phylactery. Explain this. Can this still be used? Certainly. And it is yours. I have no use for it, said Fligan. If, indeed, you wish to ascend even further from risen undead into a proper lich. Then how does this work? Said Aldrich. The process of becoming a lich, that is. Aldrich had no hesitations about turning into a lich. It would massively enhance his power, and this was not an understatement. In Elven World lore, mortal necromancers had to band up with parties of warriors and mages and priests and whatnot just to beat a single lich. Any lich, even a lower-leveled one, was a boss-type monster. A lich was simply far more attuned to death and magic than a mortal. They could control more dead, raise more dead, cast stronger curses, stronger death magic, possess higher mana pools, and so on and so forth. Mortals could only dip their toes into the well of power that was necromancy. Liches could dive into the dark arts full body and harness the class's power infinitely better. All Aldrich needed was the knowledge to become one. And here was Fligan who had devoted literal decades into turning into one. There are 3 major steps to completing the ritual, said Fligan. The phylactery is simply the first step. It is a construct of the rarest magic-capable ores and enchantments. Crystal of Orichalcum, dust of fairy wing, dragon tooth powder, flame demon fire. Yes, and you've assembled all of that into this. Aldrich nodded at the phylactery. And you said it was still usable. Usable for me. Certainly, said Fligan. Then the other 2 steps. The second is to excise any mortal chains you have, said Fligan. Mortal chains? Fuck is that? Stop speaking in goddamn riddles, said Dynamite Girl. Must I tone down my diction to match the understanding of an addlepated simpleton such as this? Fligan waved his lengthy purple fingers dismissively at Dynamite Girl. Ha! Dynamite Girl started to get aggressive, and Aldrich raised a hand. Stop. I will be the only one to talk to Fligan. You keep quiet, said Aldrich as he leered at Dynamite Girl. Got it, Captain, said Dynamite Girl. Now then, mortal chains. What does this entail? Said Aldrich. Personal bonds. Emotional attachments. These things bind your soul to the physical plane. It makes it difficult to sever your soul from your mortal shell and place it within the phylactery, said Fligan. I see, said Aldrich. This step, he was good on. As far as he knew, he had no emotional attachments anymore. His parents were dead, and Adam and Elaine were only zombies now, their souls forever gone. Then the third step. To obtain an obelisk from the Death Lord, said Fligan, his voice deathly serious. I see. I know about this one. You challenge the Death Lord and take a shard of his power from him. And this shard is called the obelisk. Yes. And let me guess, you stopped at this stage, said Aldrich. You have a completed phylactery and you can move your soul into it, meaning you had no strong personal attachments to anyone. And yet, you aren't a lich yet. This means you couldn't challenge the Death Lord. No. I tried, but the trial she forced upon me was far too difficult to overcome, said Fligan. I barely escaped with my free will, and all these years, I studied for means to overcome the Death Lord's trial with new power to no avail. And what was the nature of this trial? Said Aldrich. That, you will find out. Aldrich widened his eyes as he heard a deep, rumbling voice emanate from the phylactery in his hand. The phylactery glowed brightly, and smoke started to ripple from Aldrich's hand as the orb burned him. Master, drop that accursed object. Valera trudged forwards, but a shockwave blasted out from the phylactery that knocked everyone except Aldrich backwards. This trial quest, you call this a trial? Pathetic. You have overcome it so very easily. I can sense your desire. You are so easily willing to cast away your humanity to become a lich. But do you think this makes you special? Unique? You are just one of many mortals who were desperate enough to cast away their humanity. Humanity means nothing. It is worthless. No, I will judge your worth myself. With a trial of my own. Aldrich saw a dark purple light cascade out from the phylactery, enveloping him and drowning out the world around him. Super Necromancer System Chapter 43, The Death Lord. Equals. Expect a bonus chapter later for getting me to 100 golden tickets. We're almost at 182 for another bonus chapter. Equals. Aldrich braced himself before feeling the familiar sensation of his body warping to a different location. It was a brief moment of weightlessness that ended when his surroundings shifted in a blurred instant. No longer was he in the dilapidated underground study of Fligan. Now, Aldrich found himself in the midst of a throne room that somehow perfectly merged both royal grandeur and the decay of time. Dark and grey stone layered with dusty white ash stretched out everywhere, building up a massive hallway and 20 pairs of towering pillars. Atop each pillar stood majestically carved statues of knights and mages, and by their spiked armor and skull-patterned vestments, it was apparent that these were practitioners of the dark arts. Hanging from each pillar were dark green, nearly black banners edged with a coat of arms consisting of a skull attached to a bare spine. The throne room was massive. Large enough that it could fit 2 football stadiums inside of it at the very least. And at the very end, in the distance, was the throne. A throne of bones. Bones of every kind. Human, monster, dragon, if it was a creature that once lived, its bones were here, fused together to form a seat of honor for no less than the Death Lord itself. Master.is that it. The Lord of Death, said Valera, and Aldrich nodded both in understanding and relief. He could sense that all of his undead were with him, standing behind him. They had thankfully all been transported here with him. Yeah, said Aldrich. But different. More dangerous. Aldrich said this because the Death Lord seemed to be sentient as well. And if it could think for itself with all its immense power given to it not only by its level 100 status and the immense strength that the game lore said it possessed, then it was probably the most dangerous threat that Aldrich could think of. Far more dangerous than Seth Solar. No, forget that. Not even the Protectorate, the top 10 heroes across the entire world, were as much of a threat. More dangerous than that foul thing already was. Valera weakly leaned against her shield, still heavily damaged. We are not strong enough, Master. We have barely triumphed over the first trial quest. And we are now to face the Death Lord. The final and 12th trial. To think we would face the Death Lord now, Fligan trembled before shaking his head. O Elder, I will bring forth the greatest extent of mind strength, but know that it will be like bearing forth a single ember before a wildfire. Yeah, that armored monster's got me feeling real small. Like I'm just an ant looking up at a massive steel-toed boot, said Dynamite Girl. When will this end already? Said Fisk in a panic. Yeah, the Geist hid behind Valera and Dynamite Girl like a child, but because it was so massive and muscled, it looked ridiculous in its efforts. Aldrich remained silent and wary, but he knew everyone was right. The 12th trial quest for the Necromancer class was the final and hardest one. A Necromancer had to be level 100 to challenge it, and even then, they had to fight it with a full party of 8 fellow heroes. These heroes came from a list of AI companions the player could bring together, but every single hero was level 70 at minimum. And all of that just to face the Death Lord and its army. Lore-wise, the final trial quest was meant for the Necromancer player to defeat the Death Lord and usurp its vast power, taking away one of the evil gods supporting the Howling Dark. Defeating the Death Lord also destroyed all of the enslaved liches under its control, eliminating a sizable portion of the Howling Dark's final army. In other words, Aldrich was horrendously outmatched. Welcome to my abode, Deathwalker. The Death Lord's voice boomed through the entire hallway. It stood up with a heavy clanking of metal. It appeared to be a 3-meter-tall hulking behemoth of an armored knight with dark grey, spiked armor and a menacingly horned helmet. The Death Lord's armor seemed to be hollow inside with a green glow of energy, the very same kind that adorned Aldrich, shining through gaps in the armor. The armor's torso was shaped like a pair of metal ribs, and one could see through the gaps in those metal bones that inside was not a flesh body, but just an orb of pure green, flaming energy. The Death Lord jumped and easily cleared the near entire length of the hallway in a single leap, standing right before Aldrich with a heavy crash. So, Deathwalker, how does it feel to stand before the presence of a true master of death? Said the Death Lord as it stared down at Aldrich. I wonder what you're still doing here alive, said Aldrich, not intimidated in the least. Last I remember, I beat you and absorbed your soul. Ha! I remember that too, said the Death Lord. But I am back again. As strong as ever before. And you, my little Deathwalker, are nothing compared to what you were. And your friends. Your fellow heroes. Gone. And your undead legion. The Death Lord waved an arm towards Aldrich's undead. What has happened? This is what you bring forth to challenge me. Pathetic. The Death Lord turned around dismissively and crossed its arms. You dare to call my master pathetic? You. A mere ghost that hides in this realm of yours, said Valera. It's you again. The lady, Knight WHO only knows how to throw a punch. The Death Lord turned to Valera and looked her up and down. What of it, you brute, said Valera. I hate your type, all you meat-headed heavy armor muscle maniacs, the most. I suppose you've already taken that look for yourself. The Death Lord shrugged and gestured towards Valera's own bulky suit of armor. The Death Lord does have a point, said Fligan. Dynamite Girl smacked the tentacled monster on his head. You forget whose side you're on. Ah, Fligan rubbed his lightly dented, soft purple head and glared at Dynamite Girl and Valera. Gone are the days of proper, quiet, and gentle women, I suppose, he grumbled, thoroughly speaking like a disgruntled old man. Quiet, said Aldrich. You know, I don't want to use a look that this boorish Death Knight has already taken. Plus, you've already seen and fought me like this. The Death Lord took its gauntleted hand and tapped its breastplate. With that, its huge metal body glowed bright green before dissolving away, leaving just the orb of glowing green energy housed within the armor. The orb then turned into the silhouette of not an enormously muscled man, but a woman. A woman of Aldrich's height, actually. She stood confidently with a hand on her hip clothed in flowing green robes, a majestic grey fur coat with a gleaming green fringe, and a long skirt adorned with bones with a slit that showed off pale, shapely long legs. The Death Lord flipped flowing locks of long white hair behind her head and stared at Aldrich with a confident, sharp-toothed smile and gleaming green eyes with reptilian pupils. Draconic horns jutted from the sides of her head. So, how is it, gazing upon my true form? The last we met, the goddess Amara had weakened me so greatly I was confined only to my battle armor, said the Death Lord. Unexpected, said Aldrich with some level of confusion as he stared at the Death Lord. He knew the Death Lord's true form was hidden, and he knew that according to the law, before the Death Lord became a lich, it had been a dragon. He had no idea of the Death Lord's gender, but he had always thought by default it was male. People expect a certain image from a Death Lord, hence, how you perceived me before. But to you, my dear, who wishes to become a lich just like me, I will not hide behind threatening armor. I will meet you in my true and proper form, said the Death Lord. Master, Valera looked at Aldrich staring at the Death Lord and then she slammed her shield down, drawing the Death Lord's attention. You wish to tempt my master, is it? You think you will fall for the likes of you? You snake. Quiet, musclehead, said the Death Lord. She stretched her arms up, puffing out her sizable chest. You are standing in the presence of a true lady here. Or lord, if you prefer that. So, said Aldrich, unimpressed. What is it? If you wanted to kill us, you could have. Oh, of course, said the Death Lord. But that's not the point. This isn't like when we last met, when you fought me to kill me. No, you're reaching out to me this time for my power, are you not? You want to become a lich. And for that, you need an obelisk forged from my own essence. And, are you going to give it or not? Said Aldrich. Oh my, so forward, asking for my essence just like that. The Death Lord crossed her arms and smiled, licking her lips with a forked, snake-like tongue. No. I welcome any and all who wish to become a lich. All I require is that you pass a trial of my own. Ah, and it looks like you have one of my rejects among you already. The Death Lord waved a green-clawed finger towards Fligan. He made quite the beautiful phylactery, that one, but like all empty-headed academics and mages, he might have had the brains, but he didn't have the stones to make it through my trial. He doesn't remember your trial, said Aldrich. But I'm assuming it's impossibly difficult, is it? The Death Lord put a finger to her lips and cocked her head innocently. I don't think so. I like to think I mete out rather fair trials. And why would I not? I would love to see more of my kind. Those too weak that end up becoming my slaves, well, that's that, they simply weren't worthy. But you, Deathwalker, you have already proven yourself worthy by defeating me before. And yet here I am getting the sense that you'll still be giving me a trial, said Aldrich. Well, I don't give out my power for free, even with our past together, the Death Lord nodded to herself. Ah, I know what to do. The Death Lord put her hand into her chest and it sunk into it like it sunk into a pool of water, rippling into some interdimensional inventory space. She withdrew a green sign stone and tossed it to Aldrich. You will start at the bottom of my great royal tower, my beloved necropolis. Clear as many floors as you can. You go high enough, and you will receive my obelisk. And I will be generous, too. Any treasure you find, any monsters you raise as your own, any levels you extract, you keep. Plus, you get 3 tries. 3 lives. But you only get to keep the rewards from your best try. Ah, and this, too. Last you faced me with an entire party of heroes. If you can cough together your friends again, then I'll let them form a party with you again. And that's all I'm giving you. Now go. The Death Lord clapped her hands together, and Aldrich and his undead found himself teleported away again. This time, in the midst of a dark, spacious crypt packed with shattered tombstones. A message flashed in his status screen. Necropolis, Floor 1. Aldrich found himself fully healed with his mana restored, and the same happened with everyone else in his undead. New quest, Ritual of Eternity obtained. Attempt 1 started. Aldrich sighed as he heard groans and moans from zombies rising from the tombs around him. Everyone in his army tensed up, ready for battle. Here we go, said Aldrich as he cracked his neck. Super Necromancer System Chapter 44, Bonus, Ritual of Eternity. Aldrich and his undead moved through the necropolis floors with utter ease for the first 5 floors. These floors lay in the multi-story crypt located at the very bottom of the Death Lord's royal tower, and here, only low-level zombies came out to fight them. The difficulty of these low levels was in the sheer number of zombies. They came out in small waves at first, but then their numbers increased until it seemed like there was an infinite amount of them. The point of these floors, Aldrich realized, was to find a dimensional exit gate up to the next floor before the zombies hit a critical mass. However, no matter how many zombies there were, they were no match for Aldrich. Dynamite Girl and Fligan wiped out the zombies with utter ease. Fligan, especially as a level 20 boss that retained all his heightened stats, annihilated weak zombies with his powerful fire magic. During this time, Aldrich obtained more information about the quest to obtain the Death Lord's obelisk. He needed to reach the 15th floor to obtain the obelisk. Aldrich never knew what the necropolis held in it. In the game, the necropolis had been destroyed by the goddess of light and life Amara before the player character came to it. And, as the Death Lord stated, Amara had isolated the Death Lord in a pocket dimension that was the 12th trial quest for the player to defeat. But so far, Aldrich was not impressed. The zombies of the first 5 floors did not exceed level 10. However, on the 6th floor, the crypt fed out into the first proper floor of the necropolis, and here, the enemies upgraded from zombies into Death Knights. Death Knights were at the minimum level 15. At max, they could hit level 40, though thankfully, he did not see Death Knights at this high of a level range. Again, Aldrich relied on Fligan heavily to abuse undead fire weaknesses, but the fight became increasingly harder and harder until by the 10th floor. Aldrich found himself walking into a room full of level 20 Death Knights headed by level 30 Vampire Crimson Knight. Seeing that, Aldrich used the Sign Stone he received from the Death Lord to exit the necropolis, manifesting back into the Nexus. Aldrich had not expected to clear the trial as he was now. He simply used the first attempt he was given maximally to analyze and observe how much stronger he needed to get to reach the 20th floor. He estimated about level 30 to 40. This made sense. In the game, liches that were not mindless started out at level 30 at the minimum, indicating they too had been around the 30 to 40 range by the time they were strong enough to obtain an obelisk. But Aldrich was just level 11 for now. He needed to get much stronger. Or he needed to find a strong enough party to join him. Aldrich's first instinct was to immediately rule out the idea of a party. His power was a secret known only to him. Trying to recruit some top hero to help him would blow his secret wide open. Yet, he felt that it was a massive waste not to use all the resources given to him. But how? Aldrich mulled this over for later and went up to the system in the Nexus. The system sat at its crafting table, awaiting Aldrich. Crafting, said Aldrich. Ye got it, lad, the system. Specifically, a fusion, said Aldrich. He looked through his inventory and selected Flogan's lantern. The Lantern of Old Flame. The lantern granted significant fire resistance, enough to completely neutralize Aldrich's weakness to fire. It also granted Aldrich massive bonuses to fire-based spells, but he could not learn any. However, by upgrading the lantern by fusing it with certain materials, it was possible to change the properties of the lantern to better suit Aldrich. Fuse the Eye of Azoth into the Lantern of the Old Flame, said Aldrich. Got it. The system received 2 orbs, one containing the icon of the purple Eye of Azoth, and another containing the red and orange icon of the lantern. He stacked the orbs atop each other and smashed them together with a strike of its stick figure hand. Eye of Azoth, plus, Lantern of the Old Flame, equals, Lantern of the Accursed Eye. Unlike crafting weapons and equipment from scratch that functioned off a role-based system, fusing existing equipment with materials yielded far less variability. For example, if Aldrich obtained, say, the skin of a fire salamander, and he wanted to fuse it with his Grave Reaper's mantle, then he could know with near 100% certainty that he would get bonus fire resistance. The only downside to this was that items could only be fused up to a limit of 3 times. 1x Lantern of the Accursed Eye obtained. Rank, Uncommon plus. Stats, +10 magic. +5 vitality. +5 attunement. Effects. Protection of the Old Flame, passive, the wearer receives half damage from all fire-type damage. Eye of the Watcher, passive, any unit revealed or targeted by this item continually attains stacks of a debuff that reduces resistance to curse-type damage. The debuffs stack up to 10 times, requiring a total exposure time in this light of 30 seconds. This debuff lasts for 3 seconds after the unit escapes the light of the item, at which point the stacks will rapidly decay. In addition, any unit suffering this debuff is revealed, preventing them from entering stealth. Gaze of the Accursed, active, the eye within this item fully opens, shooting forth a cone of destructive light that deals a strong burst of disintegrating type damage with a 5% chance to instantly kill. The higher the affected unit's vitality, the higher their resistance to this instant death effect. If this skill affects a unit with 10 stacks of the Eye of the Watcher passive applied to them, it is guaranteed to instantly kill unless the affected target possesses a minimum of 80 vitality. If they possess more than 80 vitality, they will still be maimed, losing a body part and taking significant damage. Thanks, said Aldrich as he absorbed the Lantern of the Accursed Eye into him and then equipped it, for it was far better than the Staff of Stilling Pollen he used. In fact, this item was so good that Aldrich was willing to use it all the way up to level 50 using the rank upgrade function. Rank upgrade allowed the player to upgrade the rank of their equipment by sacrificing 5 pieces of the same equipment type of a higher rank. This normally was too costly to consider most of the time, as it meant losing 5 higher rank pieces of gear just to bring 1 piece up. However, for rare pieces of gear like this lantern which had multiple passives and good skills, it was highly worth it. -500 coin. Coin, 520 greater than 20. Aldrich ate the massive coin cost for the fusion because this lantern was worth it. It covered his fire weakness and made instant death magic massively better. And instant death magic mastery was what he was building towards. I have failed you, master, but we are almost there, said Valera. She clenched her fist as she remembered their failure to get to the 15th floor. We must reach the 15th floor of that hideous snake's den, is it? All we need are a few more levels. Levels, yes. That's a simple solution. We could find more variants to hunt. Move around to variant nests in the wastelands and clear them, said Aldrich. Or alternatively we could clear the quest with party members. The only issue is getting party members that won't ever reveal the secret of my powers and also strong enough to make it worth recruiting them. But at that point, why don't I spend the time to just level up and raise stronger undead? Indeed, said Valera. Aldrich tapped Exist at the Nexus, and when he entered the real world, he heard Fligan murmur in wonder. Where is this? Said Fligan. His 3 red eyes were wide with surprise. I had heard you talk of a new world. Is this it? An entirely new realm of existence? Truly? Yes, said Aldrich. How is it? Must feel nice to be free from however many decades you spent in that study. Fligan breathed in deeply and curled his mouth tendrils in disgust. The air here is tainted. Smoky. Unclean. And here I thought global anti-pollution policies were doing well, said Aldrich. Anti-pollution policies. Global. The peoples of this realm are united across the entire world. This is a wonder, said Fligan. His mouth tendrils wriggled excitedly as he rubbed his hands together. There will be an abundance of new knowledge to absorb. Knowledge that has never before been analyzed. That's right, said Aldrich. He stared at Fligan. He was a mind-eater. He had basic racial abilities that included mind control and memory absorption. He came to a realization. You will be the key to this quest. Aldrich stared at the new quest he had registered. Greater than. Quest, Ritual of Eternity. Difficulty. Time limit, none. Attempts remaining, 2. Description. You have begun the path to become a lich. To undergo the Ritual of Eternity, you must fulfill 3 objectives. Objectives. 1. Construct a phylactery, completed. 2. Sever all personal bonds, incomplete. 3. Obtain an obelisk by reaching the 15th floor of the necropolis, incomplete. Rewards. 1x obelisk. Variable EXP. Greater than. Aldrich realized immediately that step 2 was not complete. Sever all personal bonds. He thought he had done this already. Adam and Elaine were no longer truly here, and his parents were long dead. What more was there left for him? However, Aldrich did not have much time to think about this. The evil eyes he had left behind to scout the forest and Blackwater picked up on movement heading towards them, towards the clearing where he had killed Ghost. He saw through their eyes and saw a search party. An entourage of hovercars roving up the main road. Estimated time of arrival, 30 minutes. Super Necromancer System Chapter 45, Planning. As the squadron of sleek black hovercars with Blackwater's insignia painted on their doors got closer and closer, Aldrich motioned for his undead to leave. We have to go, said Aldrich. He sprinted away into the depths of the forest, making sure to clear up any humanoid tracks. If the search party for Ghosts saw human tracks, there would be immediate alarm and suspicion of foul play. However, Aldrich did not bother covering up the more monstrous tracks because he wanted the search party to see them when they got to the clearing. The team would dig up Ghost's used-up needles and find bits and pieces of his body that Aldrich had strategically left behind. Then, they would see variant tracks and rule out the possibility of murder. They would instantly rule the Ghost had died to a variant attack while too high off his mind to defend himself. And if all evidence pointed towards Ghost dying to variants, and indeed, there was already plenty of evidence to point towards that conclusion, then Blackwater would rest their search case on Ghost soon enough. In the off chance that they actually searched even harder, Aldrich was willing to move out of the variant forest and establish a second sign closer to Haven City to escape back into the Nexus until things fully blew over. Aldrich and his undead party moved out as discreetly as possible. The Geist and the crabs carried anyone with humanoid footsteps to minimize tracks. While he and his undead moved into the forest, he checked back up on the 2 evil eyes he had positioned. Aldrich kept a close look on the hovercars using his evil eye. He could not look through his evil eyes while he was in the Nexus or another dimension, but he could keep them strategically positioned and ready in the real world. One of his evil eyes tracked the search party of hovercars approaching while the other one roamed around Blackwater campus. From the evil eyes, Aldrich knew that Seth Solar and his crew were not in their dorms in Blackwater. They were in one of the hovercars approaching the variant forest. The hovercars stopped and parked on the side of the main road, getting out along with several powerful faculty members. A search squad consisting of 22 men in sleek black power armor and high-tech firearms with flashlight attachments streamed out. 2 technos opened laptops and powered on several search drones to fly over the forest. By the way they parked almost right beside Ghost's dumping spot, Aldrich could tell that Seth Solar knew where Ghost put away his drugs. Thankfully, with the 30 minutes advance notice, Aldrich was far away from the search party by the time they reached Ghost's drug drop site. Aldrich stopped and rested by sitting on a fallen tree trunk. He talked to Fligan while he multitasked and kept his sight linked with the evil eye spying on the search and rescue group. You told me there were 3 steps to fulfilling this Ritual of Eternity to become a lich, said Aldrich. I've fulfilled one of 3 conditions, and that's just because I have your phylactery in my inventory. And obviously, I need to get that obelisk. I assume then, that you desire my counsel on how to fulfill a severing of your mortal bonds, said Fligan. Yeah, said Aldrich. You see, I have no close bonds. Not any. Are you sure, Master, said Valera. The keyword is mortal bond, said Fligan, soothing Valera's worry that Aldrich was not bonded to her. A bond with a mortal undead such as we falls outside of this delineation. That's the thing. I am pretty sure I have no mortal bonds. Aldrich looked at Adam and Elaine, and they stared blankly at him with their cloudy eyes. They used to be my close friends. But that's the thing. Used to. They aren't anymore, and I know they aren't truly here by this point. They're just zombies. I was close to my parents, but they died years ago. I had no other attachments. No friends. No loves. Nothing. No loves. Valera shuddered in anticipation as she hugged herself. You have yet to have your first. My. Aldrich ignored Valera and let her fantasize while he continued talking with Fligan. So that means I should have no attachments. But apparently, I still haven't severed my mortal bonds, said Aldrich. Oh great elder, perhaps you're envisioning the concept of mortal attachment too narrowly, said Fligan. Now that the insanity induced by his dream state was gone, his voice was calm, oozing the wisdom of an intellectual that has spent over a century studying and absorbing knowledge. You believe attachment is love or friendship. A bond of warmth that keeps you connected with others. But what of hate and vengeance? They're just as strong a bond. No, they can be even stronger. Chains that can lock you with even greater hold than friendship. Vengeance. Aldrich repeated this word as he saw through his evil eye Seth Solar hovering over Ghost's clearing. He saw Seth Solar's friends behind him with their arms crossed and shaking their heads. He felt fire in his cold, dead heart. He felt vengeance. He felt a twinge of satisfaction knowing that those miserable maggots had lost one of themselves, but that satisfaction was not nearly enough to quench the fire within Aldrich. I see now, said Aldrich. Vengeance is what's keeping me here. He put a thinking hand to his chin and narrowed his eyes. Of all the people to have an unhealthy vengeance fixation on, it had to be Seth Solar, one of the toughest targets to take down that I know. Together, we can triumph over anyone, said Valera hopefully, ever optimistic. Hold up, Solar, said Dynamite Girl. I think I remember him now. You're going to try and fight the Solomon Solar? No, Solomon Solar is a proper, public top hero. Trying to target him would be a logistics nightmare and an impossibility to do secretly, said Aldrich. I'm taking out another member of his family. An asshole that comes from an illegitimate line. Weaker than the main guy and hidden from the public's eye. But even then, you're right to be surprised. Anyone with the Solar surname will be strong. How strong could this mere man possibly be? Said Valera as she saw through the evil eye with Aldrich. She spied him hovering a meter or so in the air, scanning his surroundings. He can fly, it seems, but I sense no other power emanating from him. Because his power isn't dependent on magic or levels, said Aldrich. You have to get used to never underestimating anyone in this world. Anyone could have a powerful power and you would never be able to sense it. Not unless you got a scanner like me, said Fisk. That reminds me, hand over your scanner, said Aldrich. You won't be seeing too much direct combat. Your scanner will be much more useful on me. Here boss, Fisk tossed Aldrich his red visor. Aldrich caught it deftly and experimented, attempting to put it into his inventory. He found he could not. Only magical items could go in there, it seemed. He put the visor over his eyes and watched as little numbers and screens in the periphery of his red-tinted vision started to flicker and calibrate. You don't need this for diving, said Aldrich. Diving was the term for those that used a head jack to deep dive into the virtual world of the net. Nah, I use my eye for that. Fisk pointed to his mechanical blue eye as it clacked and whirred. I mainly wore that to look cool cause, that's armor blue grade. The kind that those armor police agents got to look all tactical and shit. I see, said Aldrich. He wondered how he looked. A man in loose necromancer robes holding a lantern made of burnt bone with a glowing red eyeball suspended inside of it. On top of all this, he had on a futuristic red visor. Something about these two aesthetics did not line up. You look wonderful, master, said Valera. Well, at least he had one supporter. Power that is not based off magic nor levels nor spells nor skills. Fligan rubbed his slimy purple hands together. How quaint. How very, very interesting. I must find more knowledge about this. You, he pointed a long finger at Dynamite Girl and stared at her with wide-eyed desire for knowledge. You must have one of these powers. Will you consent to my experimentations? I promise they shall not be uncomfortable. Geez, at least you ask for consent, but I'm gonna have to say no, Squidface. I know how experiments with tentacled freaks like you end up, and I ain't about to be part of it, said Dynamite Girl. What experiments did you have in mind? Said Aldrich, curious. What? You're gonna take his side, Captain. You, Dynamite Girl narrowed her eyes at Aldrich. You're not a perv too, are you? There is nobody as upstanding and dutiful as my master, protested Valera. She blushed slightly. Though, if he does have that side to him, I would accept him too. So, said Aldrich, ignoring both women and pressing Fligan for an answer. Whether it is possible to mesh the abilities that those of this world seem to harbour within their bodies with the powers vested unto us through mana and magic, said Fligan. Among many other topics of interest, of course. I'm rather curious about that too, actually. But you'll have to let go of Dynamite Girl as your experiment. I assume I'll be needing her for quite some time. I'll find you another altar to work on soon, said Aldrich. Altar. So that is what these strange new humans are called. Fligan hungrily twitched his mouth tendrils. So be it, O Elder. I shall look forward to when I can begin my experimentations. I must warn you, though, my investigations may perhaps cause some distress within subjects. As long as you get results, said Aldrich. I'll provide appropriate subjects deserving of distress later. For now, I need to figure out what I want to do. He looked down at his watch. It was now early into the dusk of Wednesday. Just a few more days until Saturday when Seth Solar and his crew all gathered together at the Red Circle. Now, was there a way he could face all of them, including the mercenaries and villains in the Red Circle by himself at that point in time? Just 3 days from now. No. Not unless Aldrich became a lich and received the massive upgrades that came with the transformation. But here was now the issue. To become a Lich, he had to kill Seth Solar first. Aldrich had been banking on turning into a Lich before facing Seth Solar, but now that was flat out impossible, and without turning into a Lich, even with luck on his side, any fight with Seth Solar would be one of extreme difficulty. So how? Super Necromancer System Chapter 46, Bonus, Planning 2. Bonus chapter for getting me to 200 Power Stones. Expect more from meeting golden ticket goals later. As Aldrich thought of this bigger question, he went ahead and enjoyed the final piece of rewards from completing his first trial quest. Specifically, the stat points he got from leveling and the Tome of Enhancement. He first distributed the stat points from leveling up and distributed the attunement points he got from wearing a full set of equipment. Equals. Equipment stat bonuses. Plus 2-5 magic. Plus 1-3 vitality. Plus 2-5 attunement. Plus 5 perception. Equals. Aldrich invested 2 points into magic and 3 into attunement. Plus 2 to magic, plus 4 with affinity bonuses. Magic, 27 27ths greater than 31 31sts, 56. Mana, 81 81st greater than 93 93rds, 168 168ths. Plus 3 to attunement, plus 6 with stat affinity bonuses. Attunement, 45 greater than 51, 76. Base attunement at 50 equals Raise Undead spell upgraded to Mass Raise Undead. 5 attunement points available. Spells attuned, 6 6ths greater than 6 7ths. Units controlled, 16 18ths greater than 16 22nds. He then materialized the Tome of Enhancement, awarded from clearing the trial quest from his inventory. It was a far less morbid book than what the flesh-knitted covers of his necromancy tomes suggested, being a more conventional leather-bound green book. He absorbed the tome into his being. The Tome of Enhancement could be used to upgrade 3 spells, and in this case, he chose Anti-Life Shell, Create Undead First Circle, and Grave Consumption. Anti-Life Shell rank 1 greater than rank 2. Anti-Life Shell has now obtained an active function that drains 5% of max mana per second in order to enhance the life drain and greatly enhance the undead healing. In addition, all non-undead units within a shell are slowed. Create Undead First Circle, Create Greater Undead First Circle. All undead that can be summoned from the first circle are upgraded. Undead level cap for first circle raised to level 20. Grave Consumption, Mass Grave Consumption. Grave Consumption may now be cast at all graves within a 20-meter radius of the caster. With that done, Aldrich started to piece together a plan. First thing was first, if he wanted to assault the red circle, he needed to know its defenses inside and out. Create Greater Undead, said Aldrich, raising his new Lantern of the Accursed Eye into the air. He shook the lantern by its chain, and the clicking of the metal followed the creation of an upgraded evil eye known as a Grave Ward. A triple cluster of basketball-sized eyes materialized in front of Aldrich. Unlike the evil eye, which was made entirely of floating, invisible flesh, the Grave Ward was mostly incorporeal. Its eyes seemed to fade in and out of a cloud of darkness much like the Ghast. Like the Ghast, the Grave Ward was incorporeal, granting it a defensive passive that made it highly resistant to physical attacks, but much weaker to elemental or energy-based damage. Also, unlike the evil eye, the Grave Ward could change its mass and dimensions so that it could squeeze through gaps half a meter wide, though it could not entirely phase through barriers or walls. Minus 10 mana. Minus 10 health. Mana, 168 168ths greater than 158 168ths. HP, 30, 99 99ths greater than 89 89ths. Units controlled, 16 18ths greater than 17 22nds. Go to the red circle, said Aldrich, and the cluster of 3 smoky eyeballs floated away. It was twice as fast as an ordinary evil eye, flying out at the speed of an ordinary person going on a light run. Not particularly fast, granted, but still noticeably much better than the regular evil eye. Aldrich then sat in place, staring through the evil eye watching Ghost's drug dump site. He felt hot hate grow and fester inside of him as he grit his teeth watching Seth Solar and the rest of his trash friends mull about, completely free and healthy. The search team investigated the dumping site and found Ghost's needles and scraps of his body. They also found the striker, monster, and variant tracks that Aldrich had intentionally left behind. There was some discussion, but Aldrich could not hear through the evil eye for it had no ears. All he could do was watch. He could see Seth Solar talking to the security team, shoving one of them hard into a tree in minor anger. For a moment, Aldrich wondered if Seth Solar felt even the smallest bit of pain that Aldrich had felt in losing friends. Another of the security team soldiers picked up Ghost's torn finger from the ground with a pair of extended forceps, showing it to Seth Solar. Seth Solar stared at Ghost's finger with zero emotion on his face as the sociopath registered the confirmed death of his friend. He shrugged before firing a small beam of white energy from his eyes, disintegrating the finger of his former friend with zero remorse. He then just shrugged casually and dropped the security team member he pinned against the tree. He waved the rest of his crew forwards and left, getting into a hovercar that started driving back towards Blackwater. Good. That meant that Aldrich's plan had worked. He had convinced Seth Solar and Blackwater that Ghost had died to variance. As the search team packed up, calling back their drones and getting into their cars, Aldrich locked his fingers together and rested his chin on his hands, thinking. He thought. Then thought some more. To become a Lich, Aldrich had to sever his mortal bonds and obtain the obelisk. To sever his mortal attachments, he had to fulfill his vengeance against Seth Solar and his crew. To obtain the obelisk, he needed to clear the 15th floor of the necropolis, which he was too weak to do now. These seemed like two mutually exclusive objectives, and it was obvious the order in which Aldrich should go about clearing them. First, Aldrich had to grind and obtain the obelisk. Then, with the levels and rewards from clearing 15 floors, he would devise a way to kill Seth Solar using a trap involving instant death magic. But he could not shake off the feeling that there was an easier way to go about this. It did not take much longer before he came to a striking realization. There was a way to destroy Seth Solar and obtain the obelisk at the same time. Fisk, said Aldrich. Yes, boss. Appointments at the Red Circle can be set up online. No, said Aldrich. Contact them. Get in touch with the manager, this guy called Casimir. Tell them a certain Mr. Bruce Vane wants to meet about investing some of his multi-million credit inheritance. Tell them Mr. Vane is also thinking about hosting a nice private party this weekend as well. Tell him to meet privately. And of course, this goes without saying, but make sure you aren't traceable. You got it, boss, said Fisk as he took his laptop out of the bag Aldrich had taken out of the Odinson base. Fisk plugged himself into the laptop via his head jack, operating the tech mentally. Oh, and check the RR bulletin for any variant nests in the wastelands, said Aldrich. Give me a thorough list of all variant nests within a 2-mile radius of here. I don't want to waste all of daylight tomorrow just hiding in this forest. I need to hunt for levels. And this forest is running out of variants strong enough to raise my levels fast enough. On it, Fisk raised a thumbs up to Aldrich. The rest of you, do as you want for now, said Aldrich to the other undead. Train, talk, or hunt more variants. With this command, all of Aldrich's variant undead scattered out into the forest to hunt. The troll chieftain and the 2 mud crabs also followed. Wanna train, said Dynamite Girl to Valera. Pure hand-to-hand combat, you know. 'Cause, I can't be starting a fire here or anything. Plus, I think my martial arts is getting real rusty. Certainly, said Valera. But do not cry when you feel utterly powerless before me. Hey, we'll see about that, said Dynamite Girl as they squared up against each other. Meanwhile, Fligan now hovered around the Geist, poking at the variant with his long, slimy fingers. A creature such as this I have never known. How quaint. How odd. How very interesting. Gay, you're creepy, said the Geist. In the name of progress and knowledge, I have cast away any consideration for how others judge me, said Fligan. Come, let me see if you can learn magic, child. GHGH, I guess. The Geist followed Fligan away. Aldrich waited for Fisk to do his work. In the meanwhile, he had Adam and Elaine sit by him on the fallen tree trunk. We're so close, said Aldrich. So close to taking down Seth Solar. When it happens, I will make sure that you two have a chance to tear into him. It's the least you deserve. Adam and Elaine groaned and growled in response. Yeah, that's the spirit, said Aldrich with a smile. He wondered if he was going insane, talking to mindless zombies like this. Or maybe he had always been insane. Hadn't he asked himself this before already? Well, it didn't matter much now. He was what he was, and he accepted it. Equals. An hour and a half passed before Fisk spoke, looking up from his computer screen. Alright, boss, I send your message to the Red Circle. Bet we'll get a response soon. As for variant nests, well, I pulled an official map from the RR website. Fisk turned his laptop screen to Aldrich and pointed at a big chunk of map on the east coast of the United States. He tapped the area and zoomed into a forested patch of land before circling it in red. That's where we are. And here are all the variant nests in a 200-mile radius like you said. Fisk zoomed out a little, and 5 red dots appeared indicating the location of variant nests. Variant nests were, as the name suggested, nests of variants that did not pose an immediate threat to human civilization. In fact, these nests were actually welcomed as they became self-sustaining ecosystems for variants where they could populate without having to encroach on human territory. So long as the nests were not attacked, the variants within did not attack. When roads had to be made near them or new cities planned and built, the RR would send heroes to wipe the nests out. But otherwise, they were largely left alone. These were the perfect spots for Aldrich to hunt for levels and new undead. Nobody would be around here. Any minor remote surveillance that was here, some satellite imaging or whatnot, he could block with a ghast. He looked over the 5 red dots and discounted going to 3 nests that would involve having to cross over public roads where his undead could get spotted. Instead, his eye caught on 2 nests located right outside the southwestern edge of the forest. There was little to no human development here as the land was littered with huge canyons and fissures where roads could not be built. This area was called the Shatter Zone because of how the earth looked so utterly fractured, and apparently. This had been the site of a battle between the greatest hero Vanguard and a powerful giant villain called Megalodon during the Age of Villains. I know where we're going now, said Aldrich as he stood up, getting ready. Ah, us. I'm going too. Can I get a gun or something? Said Fisk. No, you can stay here. Play some games. You've done enough for me so far. Make sure not to draw too much attention. I'll be leaving Adam, Elaine, and the undead with you. The heavy hitters that actually fit inside the car I have, Dynamite Girl, Valera, and Fligan, I'll be taking with me. Super Necromancer System Chapter 47, Bonus Chapter, Variant Nest. Equals. Bonus Chapter for getting me to 180 golden tickets. Equals. Aldrich gathered all of the people coming with him on this mission to clear the Variant Nest. Valera, Dynamite Girl, Fligan, and the Alloying Eagle. He would have liked to take the Geist too, but he planned on driving down to the nest location and the Geist was simply too big to fit inside a car. After comforting the Geist that no, it did not have to lose weight, Aldrich set off at 3 in the morning. He drove with Valera in the front seat and Fligan, Dynamite Girl, and the Eagle in the back. What is this? Fligan marveled at the insides of the car as Aldrich drove. Fligan looked around like a child in a candy shop. His 3 eyes all looked in different directions as he drew his face close up to the car seats, the windows, basically everything. He in particular was mystified by a screen behind the middle console that showed GPS imagery of where the car was as well as some menus that indicated environmental information like the temperature and weather. The car could also connect to the net, but Aldrich had Fisk disable that option on the car to prevent people from tracing it. "Don't touch anything," said Aldrich as he looked through the rearview mirror, keeping an eye on Fligan. "I will contain myself, Elder," said Fligan. "Yet I find it so very difficult to believe that this is all the creation of mere technology. Of metals and ores and materials created and woven together in such a way that these lights, these movements on this screen, all of this simply happens. It is indeed a wonder," said Valera. "I doubted that man so weak and frail and mortal could ever stand without magic, but look how far they have come. They do not need beasts of burden anymore, they simply ride these beasts of metal. And look at how clearly they can capture images with their trinkets." Valera proudly showed the picture of her and Aldrich standing side by side, covered in blood from killing the Oddinsons, the Fligan and Dynamite Girl. "Aha, real nice, yeah," said Dynamite Girl, visibly uncomfortable. "My, the quality of this image is superb." Fligan inspected the picture intently. "I can discern that it is colors etched upon paper stiffened with some form of varnish. Yet, it is on par with the quality of an image imbued into a magic crystal or memory globe. And now I can gaze upon these captured memories with my master at any time I desire." Valera took the picture back, looked at it, then hugged it to her breast like a baby. Fligan continued to look around. "What I would do to break apart all of this and study it from its base components up." "Watch it, Squidface, don't want you burning down this car," said Dynamite Girl. "Is all that you can think about simple destruction?" scoffed Fligan. "All right, let's stop this argument there," said Aldrich. "But you do bring up an interesting point. You were an academic and scholar, were you not?" "I do not mean to be prideful, but I was a decreed member of the Arcanist Order," said Fligan. "Before they cast me out for pursuing the dark arts." Aldrich nodded in recognition. The Arcanist Order was a society of scholars that stood as an independent research organization in Elden World. The scholars there came from every race and faction and did not discriminate across race or borders. All were united in not only the pursuit of knowledge, but the maintenance of history. To be decreed in the Order meant one exhibited a superb level of dedication and intelligence. At the very minimum, Fligan was well practiced across multiple magical fields. Some of these included alchemy and even dwarven magatech, meaning very likely, Fligan could pick up the scientific concepts of machine working and chemistry extremely well. "You know, that doesn't sound like a bad idea," said Aldrich. "When we get back, talk to Fisk about this world's technology. He can introduce you to it. I am utterly honored to receive an opportunity to absorb such knowledge." Fligan bowed his head. Aldrich gave Fligan another nod as the car drove out of the last stretch of the Variant forest. Outside of the forest was just a vast stretch of dry, cracked earth. Where before there was overwhelming green and life, there was now bleak oranges and reds without a single tree in sight. This was a consequence of the monstering. The creation of Titan-class variants immediately following the monstering caused enormous meteorological and environmental changes throughout the entire world, making the entire planet unstable. As if Mother Nature herself had decided to wage war against mankind. Earthquakes and typhoons rocked every single continent. Water levels rose dramatically in some areas and dried down to nothing in others. Large swathes of land became completely dead, unable to support any sort of life. These stretches, dead zones as they were called, caused mass global instability through refugee crises, food shortages, water shortages, every damn type of shortage. What Aldrich drove through now was a dead zone. Just a vast stretch of dried out and dead earth. However, once the Titans were driven back to dormancy or destroyed, the planet stabilized. Granted, it stabilized in a damaged, utterly changed state nearly completely different than how it had been at the start of the 21st century, but stability was stability. It took an hour and a half of driving through the dead zone to make it to the shatter zone where Fisk had marked out the 2 Varian nests. "That's a stunning view, gotta say," said Dynamite Girl as she looked out the front window. There were canyons standing hundreds of meters tall carved out into the dead zone. This was the power of Vanguard, a man whose fists could change how maps were drawn. Of course, it helped this whole landscaping project that Vanguard's opponent Megalodon had been a 100-meter-tall behemoth who could create giant craters just by falling. This landscape was not carved by time, by winds and waters breaking apart rock little by little over thousands of years, said Fligan. It was carved by battle. "This is what the strongest altars can do," said Aldrich. "Their power nears that of the gods themselves, then," said Valera, concerned. "Entire mountain ranges formed and felled. Destruction of this scale is possible only with a spell at the 9th or 10th circle." "Yes, and we are far, far from that level right now," said Aldrich. "Take this as a reminder of what we need to work towards." Aldrich got out of the car and looked down at his iPhone. Specifically, Fisk's phone. Fisk had given it to Aldrich with all information about the 2 variant nests, including not only their locations and appearances, but also the type of variants seen in them. Aldrich stepped to the very edge of the canyon and looked down at a steep, 100-plus meter drop. He spied a large growth of twisted black branches and rock jutting out like a tumor about halfway down below. That was the first of 2 variant nests. The other one should have been very close by, but Aldrich could not see it, even with a thorough AC scan and zoom-ins using Fisk's visor. The last time information about these 2 nests had been updated on the RR database had been 6 months ago. More than enough time for a nest to have faded away for any number of reasons. Sometimes variants simply left their nests, sometimes an earthquake busted it apart, sometimes a storm washed it away, sometimes a lightning strike hit it, whatever. At the very least, Aldrich did not feel particularly worried that one of 2 nests were gone. In fact, it just made it easier to decide which nest to take on. Aldrich waved his hand and casted, Create Greater Undead. He chose to create another Grave Ward. Minus 10 HP. Minus 10 mana. HP, 99/99 greater than 89/99. Mana, 183 183 greater than 173 183. Units controlled, 1820 seconds greater than 1920 seconds. When the three eyeballed undead formed, Aldrich sent it down to scout the nest to make sure there were no surprises. Aldrich snapped his fingers and the alluring eagle by his side. He hopped on. Valera, get on. Neither of us can fly, said Aldrich. He pointed at Dynamite Girl and Fligan. And you too, fly down. Don't want to weigh the eagle down too much. Got it, Captain, said Dynamite Girl. Understood, Elder. Fligan began to float in the air for he knew the flight spell. Aldrich watched Fligan fly and wondered whether it was possible for the Mind-Eater scholar to devise a way to teach Aldrich the useful spell. After all, it was said that in the game lore the scholars of the Arcanist Order recorded and created spell tomes. Valera plopped on behind Aldrich on the eagle's back. The eagle squawked in protest to the sudden weight increase, especially considering Valera's heavy full-plate armor. Dear eagle, are you implying what I think you're implying? Valera cocked her head and stared down at the eagle with a blood-chilling smile. The eagle shivered and put its head down. Seeing that, Valera nodded before nervously looking at Aldrich. What is it? Said Aldrich. May I hold you, master? To stay safe on this eagle, of course, said Valera. It's a 10-second flight down, began Aldrich before he saw Valera looking at him with big pleading puppy eyes. All right. Valera squealed in delight as she wrapped her arms around Aldrich, crushing his breath out of him. Oh, okay then, said Aldrich. It's time to go. Super Necromancer System Chapter 48, Clearing the Nest. Aldrich and his undead flew into the entrance of the variant nest. When Aldrich and Valera hopped off the eagle and landed in the dark, subterranean entrance tunnel, he waved the eagle away. Wait outside. In a confined space like this, you won't do well. When I signal, come down here and pick us up, said Aldrich. The eagle bobbed its head in a nod and then flew away. Aldrich stared ahead into the depths of the nest. The path ahead led through a dark, winding tunnel that sank deeper down into the cliff. He tapped his red scanning visor and checked any recent heat signatures. Nothing. The whole place was cool, almost cold. A good respite from the hot sun above. A natural place for variants to gather and live. Aldrich kept his eyes tuned in with the grave ward that he sent to scout ahead. He did not want to move into this unknown nest without having mapped out where he wanted to go beforehand. While the grave ward scouted, Aldrich looked down at Fisk's iPhone, making sure to keep the brightness down way low so as not to attract attention. He refreshed his memory on the few reports the RR had made about this nest, the latest of which was dated 6 months ago. Beings that possessed alter organs and cells emitted a natural energy signature that could be traced, especially when the powers were active. However, if there was a large enough density of dormant organs, such as in the case of variant nests, it was possible to determine a rough average estimate of energy emissions. With that, the RR determined how strong a variant nest was and categorized them into letter ranks that ranged from E to S. Broad RR guidelines suggested that 10 alters of the nest rank were required to fully destroy it, but of course, this number was highly flexible depending on what type of variants there were in the layout and unique characteristics of the nest itself. As for this nest, Aldrich read that it was ranked a solid D. The variants recorded here seemed to be largely reptilian with a few arthropod types, specifically ants. Not particularly threatening. However, aside from these few reports, there was precious little information about the nest. Aldrich figured it was because as a D-rank nest, it was simply not that important. Dynamite Girl, said Aldrich. Call me Stella, said Dynamite Girl. That was the name I remember having. And the name I remember using with people closer to me. Close, Valera leered at Dynamite Girl suspiciously. Close as in trust, said Dynamite Girl, or Stella as she wanted to be called. How strong do you think we are, said Aldrich. In terms of how we compare to variants and heroes. What rank do you think we are? Stella crossed her arms and stared at everyone for a good minute or so, nodding to herself. Alright, here's what I think. Mind you, I'm not some kind of expert on all this. I think Valera is high up on the C rank. So C+. Only C+. Are you sure you're not miscalculating, said Valera. No, I think I'm fairly right. Come on, don't complain, I was on the lower end of the C rank. Maybe now in the middle now that I can surpass my limits, said Stella. Squidface is like, I dunno, low to mid B rank. You gotta understand here, there's a huge gap between the E, D ranks with C, then there's a huge jump between B to A, then an even bigger jump from A to S. Then what about me? How would you class me? Said Aldrich. You, Captain, Stella cocked her head. Well, I guess if you were working as a hero, maybe like, low C. You dare to suggest the Master is that weak? When he is the very reason you enjoy eternal life now, protested Valera. That's what I was going to say, said Stella. The Captain's powers ain't really suited to this whole hero thing. If he joined the agency, I don't think they'd let him use his powers, all the rare and the dead and stuff. But say he was a villain, then I'd say he's already way up at high B in terms of just straight up individual strength, he's around or slightly below us. But the simple fact that he can do all this necromancy stuff means he'd get classed as an insanely high threat. Maybe already a low A, considering the fact that the RR places a threat premium on villains or variants that are considered self-replicating or capable of creating minions and more threats. I see, said Aldrich. Well then, we're 4C to B rank threats taking an AD rank nest. This should be no issue at all. Yeah, I figure, said Stella. Good, Aldrich figured out where to go via the grave ward. It's time to start hunting. Aldrich spun his lantern around by the chain, a ghostly red light flickering around him from the glow of the eye entrapped within. The light lit up his surroundings, showing more than a dozen pairs of gleaming yellow, reptilian eyes staring at him. Below these eyes were rows of sharp teeth. Up ahead, Aldrich could hear Valera's shouts of, "Die! Die! Die!" in the distance accompanied by regular explosions and bursts of light from Stella. You do not wish for my interference, said Fligan as he walked beside Aldrich, his arms behind his back. No. I want to see how well I stand up compared to D-rank monsters on my own. You're here as insurance in case anything surprises me, said Aldrich. And I'll repeat this again, do not interfere. Understood, Elder. Fligan nodded and watched. Come on, Aldrich waved his free hand towards himself, egging the blurred lizards onwards. Each of them were the size of large dogs with grey and brown color patterns on their scales that shifted, making them blur and camouflage into their environment. The blurred lizards loosed shrill screams as they rushed forward. Aldrich casted Negative Surge on himself, granting himself 10 seconds of massively enhanced stats. He gained 12 strength, agility, and perception along with a strong aura of green. -15 mana. Mana, 183 183rds greater than 168 183rds. Strength, 11 greater than 23. Agility, 10 greater than 22. Perception, 13 greater than 25. Aldrich backstepped, evading two lizards from chomping down on him. He swung his lantern forwards in a swiping arc that broke both lizards' necks. He immediately had to retreat again as several more lizards rushed forward, trampling over the corpses of their dead brethren to try and maul Aldrich. Aldrich activated his anti-life shell. A foggy green mist emanated from him, and inside, all of the lizards were slowed, their life force sapping away. Their camouflage did not matter because the light from the lantern of the accursed eye revealed them constantly. And now that Aldrich was considerably faster and the lizards slower, he outmaneuvered them with ease. He swung his lantern forward with expert handling, shooting out the head like a wrecking ball that caved in skulls with each strike. All right, said Aldrich. He put down his lantern. Time to test my hand-to-hand. He squared up in a shoulder-width stance, raising his arms in a guard. A lizard lunged at him, and he unleashed a straight kick upwards, smashing his bare foot right into the variant's chin and launching it into the rocky ceiling above. Another lizard came forwards, leaping up and snapping at his arms. Aldrich spun around and launched a downward elbow strike that broke the attacking lizard's skull and then used the lizard's corpse as a shield to prevent three more lizards from swarming him. The three variants instead sunk their teeth into the corpse. Aldrich pushed and tossed the corpse away, making the lizards fall backwards. Good, Aldrich. His skills were not gone, and training like this helped to keep him sharp. Now for my magic. Aldrich deactivated the active portion of his anti-life shell to conserve his mana. Mana, 168 183rds greater than 123 183rds. He had only kept it up for 5 seconds, but the 5% maximum mana per second drain was hefty. But expected. Anti-life shell, S active was not that useful for its mana cost until higher ranks when it obtained a stronger slow, stat debuffs, an instant death effect, and heavy buffs to undead. Time for my magic. Aldrich picked up his lantern and wielded it in one hand while he kept his other hand free to cast magic. 6 lizards surrounded Aldrich now, making it difficult to fight them hand to hand. Aldrich activated his lantern of the accursed eye and shone it in front of him. A cone-shaped laser of crimson light blasted forth, illuminating the 3 lizards in front of him and making them shriek as their flesh started to turn into ash and disintegrate. He then dealt with the 3 other lizards behind him by casting chill bolts with his free hand. 2 chill bolts per lizard. 1 to stun them, 1 to freeze and smash their brains. -24 mana. Mana, 123 183rds greater than 99 183rds. 12 blur lizards defeated. Plus 480 XP. Express bar, 871,400ths greater than 1350 1400. All done. Aldrich patted his hands together. Content. Excellent work, Elder, said Fligan. Such competency in the dark arts along with exceptional physical abilities. It does remind me of my younger days, but now my lower back ails me far too much for such wild movement. Yeah, Aldrich cracked his neck. But my weakness as a Legion Necromancer stays the same. I don't have an issue defending myself, but when I do, I have to eat through my mana rapidly. It's far more efficient to let my undead do the real heavy lifting. Aldrich looked at the dozen grave markers floating above the lizard corpses. His health was completely full. He did not even have to replenish his corpse barrier. In fact, he did not even have to manifest the barrier in the first place. He could choose to keep it dormant or spontaneously generate it, but obviously, generating a barrier of corpses made it difficult to engage in hand-to-hand combat. Maybe it was better for him to be riskier in combat. Take more damage, especially when facing larger enemies, and then use his grave consumption to restore lost health. Aldrich noted this down for later. More experience funneled into him from Valera and Dynamite Girl practically speed-running their way through the lizard-infested tunnel, blowing up or punching through anything they saw. 30 blur lizards defeated. Plus 1200 XP. Express bar, 1350 1400 greater than 2550 1400ths. Level up. Level 11 greater than 12. Express bar, 1200-1600. Plus 5 stat points available to distribute. Aldrich nodded. Now this was more like it. Mass express farming. The kind that Aldrich theorized would skyrocket his levels up. Aldrich started to invest points back into his physical stats more. In the game, he did not invest much of anything into his physical stats, but that was because he knew the enemies he would face. He needed to be more self-sufficient in the real world. Plus 5 strength. Strength, 11 greater than 16. Aldrich figured that getting his strength, agility, and perception up over 20 would make him strong enough to handle a C-rank hero or villain reliably. He noted that the first few stat points he invested into his physical stats made a massive difference. Just 5 points got him almost twice as stronger and faster than a normal man. The stats, or at least the physical ones, did not seem to increase multiplicatively. Every 5 points did not make him twice as strong or fast. It was difficult to quantify in numbers exactly how much stronger he got with each stat point. The only thing that mattered was that he did. He figured that the 20 to 30 stat threshold for his physical stats would keep him self-sufficient, especially with Negative Surge, and, later, his upgraded version, Death Surge. Aldrich then felt a mental signal from Valera. Master, you should be here. There's a monster here that will be to your liking when we have slaughtered it. On it asterisk said Aldrich. Super Necromancer System Chapter 49, Bonus Chapter, The Bloodspitter. Equals. Bonus chap for getting me to 400 Power Stones. Equals. Aldrich and Fligan stepped up to the precipice of a ledge leading down into a large nest scattered with blackened scorch marks. Charred and torn apart lizard corpses and destroyed eggshell shards lay strewn about everywhere, the remnants of Valera and Stella destroying everything in their path together. They might not have gotten along in other circumstances, but in battle, in killing, well, they were best friends. Good to see you, Master, said Valera as she raised her cross shield as Stella hunkered down behind her. A much larger lizard, almost twice the size of the other ones, hissed at Valera. It did not have the blurring camouflage effect on its scales, and indeed, it seemed that its scales were meant to be shown off. They were spiked and oriented in thick plates like armor. Two noticeable, large red glowing horns jutted out from the sides of its head. The lizard's yellow eyes turned bright red before firing off a twin stream of highly pressurized blood. The blood slammed against Valera's shield with a crashing impact, but she dug her greaves in and held her ground. The blood crashed and splattered behind her, and anywhere the blood touched, it ate away at, melting the rocky ground with ease. Aldrich did not know what the variant was. Because Blackwater thoroughly neglected the Dud students, Aldrich had no access to classified R information about variants. The more common ones, he could find info on through the net, but stronger and rarer ones like this, nothing. Can I get some help here? Said Stella. Squid face. Shall I? Said Fligan. Go ahead, Aldrich nodded. Fligan floated in the air and clasped his hands together. I suppose you young ones do require the assistance of a true master. Stella was about to say something, but she heard Flogan's words and stopped. Bright orange magic circles formed around Flogan's hands. I am eager to see how the creatures of this new world deal with proper magic. Fligan cast, Flame Lance, shooting out a concentrated spear of bright orange and red flame. The blood-shooting lizard stopped its blood spray and looked up before the fire slammed into it. The magically condensed flames acted like a spear, too, stabbing into the lizard's stomach with piercing damage. The lizard just sat there as the flames exploded over it, taking 0 damage. Aldrich noted this development with interest. He saw that the lizard's spiked scales were distorting, and not just because of the heat waves from Flogan's flames. They were doing something to nullify the damage. This thing's a bloodspitter lizard, said Stella. Its hide's resistant to practically any damage. You gotta hurt it internally. You tell me this now, said Fligan. Well, I kinda wanted to see you macking a fool of yourself after acting all cocky. Stella smiled a little before she grew serious. But yeah, now that you know, go ahead and toast this thing from the inside if you can. These things are practically indestructible, but they're slow, and they need to breathe. Burn up the air here and cook this thing out. A surprisingly apt strategy coming from one such as yourself. Fligan prepared to cast Flamethrower, and constantly generate flames to fill the area with smoke to drain it of oxygen. Wait, Aldrich raised his hand. I'll do it myself. Aldrich jumped up and landed behind Valera. Give me some protection, said Aldrich. Understood, Master. Valera stood firmly in front of Aldrich with her shield up. One last thing I wanted to test out, said Aldrich. He took out his lantern and flashed its eerie red light at the lizard. He did not fully open the eye of the lantern for its disintegration effect. Instead, he just kept the foggy passive light on the lizard. The lizard cocked its head and blinked its eyes, wondering what the light was supposed to do. Unless Aldrich opened the eye held within the lantern, it did not do damage. It just stacked the Eye of the Watcher, passive. 3 seconds of exposure under the light for 1 stack of the passive, with the stack supplying up to 10 times. Each stack reduced resistances to curse-type damage, and there was one type of magic that Aldrich knew that fell under curse-type damage that he was very curious about. Instant death magic. The bloodspitter lizard growled, still a little confused as to why nobody was reaching out to attack it. After 5 seconds, it grew impatient and decided to shoot out its acidic bloodstreams again from its eyes. Valera raised her shield again while Aldrich actually moved out of the shield and strafed to the side, content in knowing that the lizard had distracted itself firing its initial blast at Valera. He lost his cover against the blood, but this allowed him to cast the light continually on the lizard without Valera's shield and the splashing of blood to obscure him. The lizard ignored Aldrich and just kept its blood spray on Valera and Stella, obviously registering him as far more of a threat. Aldrich waited as he cast the light on the lizard. He had expected to dodge the blood or an attack or anything hostile, but the lizard simply did not care about him. It could not feel pain, so it ignored him. It appears the creatures of this new world do not understand the concept of debuffs, noted Fligan. Or this variant is simply stupid. Most likely, a combination of both, said Aldrich. Regardless, it's time for me to begin my instant death experiment. 30 seconds passed, stacking the Eye of the Watcher debuff on the Bloodspitter lizard fully. A shimmering red haze flickered around the lizard, signifying that it was fully debuffed, its resistance to instant death neutralized incredibly low. Even more so against the lantern's active disintegration attack. Let's test how your invincible scales deal with this. Aldrich opened the eye of his lantern, casting Disintegrating Gaze. When the eye suspended within the lantern opened up, it was horribly bloodshot with a dark purple iris and blazing red, hateful pupil. The normal foggy red light the lantern cast transformed into a solid, conical beam that washed over the lizard. Aldrich was careful only to let the beam hit the lizard's head as he wanted to preserve its body. The lizard managed to let out one confused shriek before its head turned solid white before breaking apart into a pile of ash. The creature slumped over, dead, its neck stub utterly cauterized so that not even blood pulled out. Looks like alter powers, or at the least this one, can't defend against instant death. Good to know. Aldrich walked over to the lizard's headless corpse and waited to see whether a soul appeared. None. But a grave marker did. Aldrich had wanted to see whether he craft an item, specifically an accessory like a ring, to give him some of the lizard's invulnerability. But unfortunately, no soul popped up. Bloodspitter lizard defeated. Plus 300 XP. Express bar, 1200 1600 greater than 1500 1600. Serve. Aldrich put a hand over the headless lizard corpse. Strands of green energy trickled into its body, making it shake and stand up. However, it immediately just collapsed back down again after the initial jolt of negative energy had reanimated it. This was because its brain was destroyed, preventing it from processing any thoughts. Unlike skeletons that did not need brains to move at all, it seemed that zombies and higher undead still required their heads to function. Hence why Aldrich could get put down if his brain was blasted apart. Aldrich could, however, manually manipulate the lizard to move, and this he did now until his passive, anti-life shell, healed the creature back up over time. Minus 5 mana. Mana, 99 183 greater than 94 183. Bloodspitter lizard LVL 14 raised. Units controlled, 1920 seconds greater than 2020 seconds. He checked the lizard's powers. It possessed 3 powers like the Geist. First, its scales were essentially completely immune to damage. They distorted space to prevent any harmful matter from breaching him, hence the heatwave-like distortions. This did not, however, apply to areas without scales such as their eyes, nose, or internal organs. Secondly, it could fire highly acidic blood streams from its eyes. The blood was acidic enough that if it hit an average man, it would reduce said unlucky bag of flesh into nothing but a gooey puddle within a second. Third, it possessed a heightened form of kinetic vision that allowed its eyes to track targets with extreme accuracy on top of zooming in across a distance of 1 mile, 1.6 kilometers. Overall, the lizard was quite powerful. Very likely one of the strongest variants within this nest. Good work, everyone, said Aldrich. But there's more. The Grave Ward has scouted another series of tunnels leading further down. Next, we'll be fighting ants. Bugs. I hate them, said Stella. I must agree with you on this, said Valera. How their many legs skitter and scatter, it is truly grotesque. Bah, this is why it is not prudent to have women in a party, said Fligan. They're so dainty and clutch their skirts over such little things. Valera and Stella both gave Fligan a death stare that made him go quiet. Fligan truly was like an old grandpa, complaining about his painful lower back, young people this, women that, and whatnot. Enough distractions, said Aldrich. I want to clear most of this nest out fast. Enough to get as many levels as possible, but without destroying it fully, otherwise it might attract attention. Super Necromancer System Chapter 50, Sudden Attack. For the next 30 minutes, Aldrich and his undead traveled through tunnels that grew smaller and narrower. Here, oversized ants the size of dogs crawled about en masse. The tunnels were a tight enough fit that the group had to travel in a single file line, making it impossible for everyone to fight at once. Aldrich created an easy formation to get around this issue. He placed Fligan ahead of him and Stella at the back. Those two had the strongest area of effect abilities, and so Fligan just had to torch his way forward and Stella could blast whatever ants tried to swarm from behind. Meanwhile, Aldrich and Valera leisurely walked between them, letting the two barbecue any threats that came their way. Rock your ants, explained Dynamite Girl as she finger-flicked a small cloud of sparkles out, her sublimated blood, and detonated it, annihilating a group of cluster of 10 ants. So called because their mandibles can shatter rock. They eat the minerals or something inside of them. Do they have a queen? Said Aldrich. Information about ant variants was widespread enough that it was relatively well known that they largely tended to reproduce asexually, creating egg clusters on their abdomens after absorbing enough nutrients. However, in rare cases and under circumstances that were as of yet not researched too well, ants could form a large colony under a queen that took over the reproductive process completely. These colonies became incredibly dangerous extremely quickly for in short generations. They could create ants with a variety of alter powers. Information about this was so prevalent because 15 years ago, there had been a massive, unchecked ant colony in South Korea that killed over 100,000 people. The disaster had required the intervention of the country's 2 S-ranked heroes to eliminate. A similar incident had struck the west coast of the United States as well, and that had taken a team of 15 top A-class heroes to deal with. Nah. They're rogue ants. Look at their behavior. Zero coordination. And if there was a queen, we'd be fighting soldiers with powers by now. Good. Aldrich knew that if this was a proper colony, he was ill-equipped to deal with it unless it had formed very recently. But since these were just rogue, nearly mindless ants, he and his undead breezed through the ant-infested tunnels. Over 30 minutes, Dynamite Girl and Fligan had killed over 100 ants, easily giving Aldrich enough EXP to level up. 140 Rockjaw ants defeated. Plus 700 XP. Express bar, 1500 1600 greater than 2200 and 1600s. Express bar, 600 and 1800s. Level up. Level 12 greater than 13. Plus 5 stat points available to distribute. Aldrich invested 5 points into agility. Agility, 10 greater than 15. He then looked ahead as Fligan casually used his flamethrower spell to annihilate ants before they could even get within 20 meters of the group. Because Fligan retained his boss stats, his mana pool was incredibly large, and in addition, he knew spells that he did not use back in the game. In particular, he had a useful spell called Clarity that restored 10% to the caster and any friendly unit's maximum mana. Fligan used this whenever he could, topping up not only his mana pool, but Aldrich's as well. Mana, 99 183rds greater than 183 183rds. The only issue with Clarity was that it had a long 1 minute cooldown, but that was long only in terms of the game. In the real world, 1 minute was nothing. As a boss, Fligan only had a pre-programmed moveset, but as a real-life being, he knew spells he should have known as a studied scholar who had knowledge of many magical fields. How much more magic do you know other than fire magic? Said Aldrich. I have dabbled in Arcanism, said Fligan. Arcanism was the magical field where utility spells like clairvoyance, divination, status checking and meta magic fell in. Clarity fell in this field too. But I am a mere amateur in the field. I only studied enough to enhance my fire magic, said Fligan. I was always more of a researcher, you see. I preferred the comfort of my study in a laboratory over the thrill of weaving magic circles and manifesting grand, instant effects. Thus, I am most versed in alchemy. I have earned recognition in all those subfields of potionology and metamorphics. Alas, I fear my knowledge utterly useless now in this strange new world. With no magic and mana in the air, none of the flora, fauna, and all as I am familiar working with the present. I assume that's why you are so interested in researching whether you can teach magic to the Geist, said Aldrich. If you can get magic to work here, then you won't be lacking in raw materials for your alchemy anymore. You think correctly, O Elder. Flogan's mouth tendrils quivered in anticipation. An old scholar friend of mine, before I was cast out of the order, was an accomplished artificer and enchanter. I requested a spell tome from him with a construct base spell imbued within it. I further tailored the spell so that it could conjure a small copy of a working alchemical laboratory. Yet without raw materials, that laboratory is nothing but a study desk. I require raw materials or living creatures with magic imbued within them for my experimentations. Aldrich knew that in the game's lore, mages could technically learn multiple magical fields. However, due to the constraints of game mechanics, a mage could only specialize in up to 3 different subfields of magic. For necromancers, they were even more limited to just practicing the dark arts. Is it possible for you to create spell tomes for me? Said Aldrich. Certainly, said Fligan. But to create a tome, I again require the appropriate materials. Enchanted vellum. A binding fashioned from some magical creature. Ink with the essence of mana crystals imbued within it. All of these, I am thoroughly lacking. Aldrich put a hand to his chin, thinking. Maybe you're not thinking wide enough. There's a chance that your alchemy still works. If you can create a laboratory, then you should still try to process materials from this world and see whether they can be used. You were correct, O Elder. And that was most certainly my intention, said Fligan. I simply require a more permanent location to set up this laboratory of mine, for I possess only 2 charges of create base to utilize. That forest is too open an area to construct my laboratory within. I would like a space more private and defensible. In time, I'll see to it that we settle down somewhere outside of that forest, said Aldrich. Settling down with Master, oh, how wonderful that does sound, said Valera. Fligan stopped channeling flamethrower, and his 3 eyes narrowed down to slits. What is it? Said Aldrich. There are no more ants, said Fligan. Or rather, they have fled. This is quite the ominous development. Yeah, Aldrich immediately put a finger to his temple, checking in on his grave ward. He could not look simultaneously through every single undead he had at once. At best, he could multitask and look through 2, maybe 3 different pairs of eyes. However, he placed specific triggers on his undead to link his sight to them, such as if they encountered an alter human or if they faced significant danger. Thus, while Aldrich was distracted talking with Fligan, he was not linked with the grave ward. However, he was confident the grave ward would notify him if anything was out of the ordinary, and yet, when Aldrich checked in now, he could see that his grave ward was in fact dead. It had not died long ago. It had fallen literally the second before Aldrich checked in on it. Units controlled, 2020 seconds greater than 1920 seconds. Whatever had killed it had done so very recently, and most likely, it was coming for Aldrich and his group now. That was when Aldrich saw the tunnel around him start to shift. The entire place started to quake as the rocky ceiling and floor undulated like waves on water. What is this phenomenon? Said Fligan. It appears similar to a teleportation spell, and yet the exact amplitude of spatial distortion that I observed does not align with any form of magic I know. Master, with me, Valera stood right beside Aldrich, her shield ready to protect him. I don't know, confessed Aldrich. This isn't magical, to be sure. This is also based warping. Shit. I can't believe it, began Stella as she looked around with quick, alert head motions. What is it? Said Aldrich. Out of everyone here, Stella had the most knowledge of variants, and if she was worried, Aldrich was worried too. Everyone, stick together. Grab a hold of each other, shouted Stella. Her voice was urgent enough that Aldrich did not question her, he just followed her. Everyone grabbed each other, and at that moment, the tunnel surroundings rapidly warped away.